Great. Thanks, everybody, and glad to be presenting this Evisors webinar today. As Jordan and Dan have mentioned, I am got a lot of experience working in marketing and brand management, so I'm happy to talk to you today about some of my background, my perspective on the industry. Feel free to ask me any questions you have, and then if there are other topics that you want to discuss afterwards, feel free to reach out to me as well through my Evisors profile. So just a quick agenda for today in the webinar. I'll just give you a brief overview of myself. I'll talk a bit about the industry overall in terms of what you can expect, what companies are out there, and what the roles really are like. I'll give you some perspective in terms of how to research the industry, what firms are looking for. Having gone through this experience a couple times through business school, I can give you my perspective, as well as now being a recruiter, going back to business schools to hire undergrads and MBAs, I can give you that perspective. That also takes me to what to expect in the recruiting process, and then finally what to expect in the interview, and we'll end with a Q&A. So just a quick summary about myself. As I mentioned, I am a graduate from business school. I attended the Richard Ivey School of Business at the University of Western Ontario in Ontario, Canada. I did not only my undergrad, which was an honors in business administration, but I also completed my MBA a few years back. Since I graduated from my MBA, I have continued to work at General Mills. I was recruited by General Mills from school, and so I started out as an associate marketing manager, and then was promoted to marketing manager, which is my current role today. And then from 2005 to 2007, so a couple of years before my MBA, after I was done in my undergrad, I worked for Indigo Books and Music, which is the national book retailer in Canada, and I worked on their loyalty program in marketing. And then briefly before that, I spent a summer interning at Research in Motion, working in their direct marketing division. So I worked in a B2B capacity, selling BlackBerry. And then to this day, I continue to work as a consultant on Evisors, so I'm happy to talk to anyone about careers in marketing, admissions, or just business plan development. These are big passions of mine, so feel free to reach out. I've also been working with Veritas Elite Test Preparation, helping those looking to go back to school and do their MBA. And then I'm also, just some of my interests, I'm a big tennis fan. I love listening to all kinds of genres of music. You'll find me often watching reality TV and enjoying a Starbucks. So those are just some of the things I like to do in my pastime. So an overview of the industry. Essentially, there's two types of roles that you can take within marketing. Traditional marketing is often referred to as brand management. And when we talk about brand management, what we're really talking about are consumer packaged goods companies. Those can be consumer packaged goods companies that work or that sell food, personal care products, home, health, beauty, pharma, all those types of products. Then there's also the non-traditional side of marketing, and that is marketing in other industries where it's not necessarily a consumer packaged goods environment. So I've listed out a couple examples here: retail, technology, advertising, media, digital. There's many others. For the focuses of today's presentation, given that I know a lot of you are current students looking to recruit and to get into marketing, most universities tend to focus their recruiting efforts within CPG. And so the focus of a lot of the content today will be related to CPG, but I'm happy to talk about both CPG and non-CPG, as I've had experience working in tech, in retail, and CPG, and I can provide you with multiple types of perspective. So what you'll see in terms of within marketing and within CPGs is there's two types of CPGs. There's Tier 1 and there are Tier 2. And it really varies by which type of a company you're looking for. I've given you examples in terms of my perspective. There's no real definition between what would be considered a Tier 1 CPG or a Tier 2 CPG. A lot of it comes down to how you look at it. So The lens that I've put to this categorization, if you will, is a couple things. One, it's obviously large multinational corporations that have a lot of different brands, and the tier ones are those that tend to play in a lot of different categories. The other thing that you may find as well with a lot of tier one CPGs is some of the tier twos, while they might be really large in size, they may not have a large advertising or marketing budget or marketing department. And so tier one CPGs are really those where the organization is rallied and centered around marketing. Marketing is almost at the hub of the organization, and the rest of the functions, whether it's supply chain or finance or IT, they are support functions for marketing, and marketing drives the business forward. That is generally what you'll find to be a big difference between a tier 1 CPG and a tier 2 CPG, which while will still have fantastic brands, the tier 2s tend to be either specialists in manufacturing or will have the focus of their efforts beyond sales in relationships with the retailers. You'll also see here tier 1 and across tier 1 and tier 2, there is a breadth of all kinds of different industries. So when you talk about CPG, you're usually talking about pharma companies, some food companies, as well as some personal care, home, health, and beauty. There is alcohol and alcoholic beverage companies. Those tend to be, while they are part of a CPG definition, they tend to operate quite differently than a lot of other CPGs, and so they don't necessarily follow the same model. The key things that you want to understand, though, in terms of the difference between traditional marketing that I talked about earlier, as well as brand management, comes down to the nature of your role. When you work in brand management, you almost have two different functions. One part of your role is what's called brand marketing or consumer marketing. And that is the stuff that I think a lot of people traditionally think of when they think of marketing. That is stuff like developing TV advertising or online advertising, developing promotions, working on your packaging. But then there is a whole other side to brand management that can often be called running a business or business management. And what that relates to is managing the day-to-day. So that's working with finance and managing your profit and loss of your brand, because you've got ownership for the targets and the profit that you have to deliver to your organization. It also ties to things like working with supply chain on production and making sure that you're manufacturing all your products okay. Products are safe for consumers to use and to consume. So you end up, while you might not be the owner of supply chain or of finance or of product development and research, you are a key player in those discussions and you drive a lot of the work and strategy. That's probably the biggest difference in a CPG organization where you're doing marketing versus, say, a retail or a tech company where you are often providing sales support or marketing support to another function. So, just some topics in terms of how to research the industry. So, as you're in school, there is an infinite number of different ways as to how you can research the industry, start to find out, is marketing right for you, and how can you break into marketing. These are some examples that I'm happy to talk about further. First and foremost, it seems kind of obvious, but you'd be surprised at how few people go out and visit the company website. It's very important to understand, what is the company value, what's their mandate, what is their focus, and a lot of this information you'll find not only in the company website, but in documents like the shareholders report or other publications that they will publish themselves, such as press releases and media releases. So make sure you do good research on their websites there. The other important thing to note, as I know many of you are from all over the world, CPGs are very global. And so you want to have a good understanding. If you're in, say, the United States or you're in France, you want to make sure you have a good understanding of what brands does that company market in that specific market. So if you're in the U.S., you want to make sure you're understanding, what brands do they sell in the United States that might be featured on their website, but are other brands that could potentially only be sold in Europe versus actually being sold in the U.S. Having a good sense of what they are selling in the market that you are looking to work for is an important point of distinction. Vault guides are great resources that provide you with a general overview in terms of what to expect in both marketing and brand management. But if you really want to think about differentiating yourself, a lot of that type of content is something that other individuals are going to read. So some of the best content that you can get are things that you can find out on your own that will be unique information to you that others might not have. You can get a lot of that information by doing things like going to your career services department or joining a lot of clubs and getting exposure to companies and to information sessions that might be being run. A lot of companies will run informational interviews, or they'll have, or your universities may have alumni partnership programs. Those are great ways to break in. I can give you the example of I had wanted to work for Indigo Books and Music for some time when I was in school in my undergrad, and they don't traditionally recruit out of school, so I had to go about it in a different way. So the way I went about it was I went through the alumni partnership program at my university. I found somebody that was a past grad of my university that worked in a marketing capacity at the organization. I did an informational interview where I actually got the chance to go to their offices, meet this person. So I got to see what the culture was like at the company, see if I felt like it would be a great fit. And it gave me a lot of ideas and inspiration. And so I started to use what I learned through that informational interview to develop a bit of a business case, if you will, or a sales pitch on why I think I would be a great person or a great candidate to work for that company. And you know what? I put together a little letter. I sent it off to the company, and it worked. It got me a foot in the door. It got me an interview, and that interview ended up resulting in an internship. And they saw a lot of value in that, so they started to continue to run internships. So I really encourage you to think, if there's companies that you're interested in where they might not be recruiting at your school, how can you research the industry in a non-traditional way that's going to help differentiate you and set yourself apart? Other examples of things you can do are participating in case competitions and simulations. I can give you examples. L'Oreal is a great example. They run a brand management simulation that is actually run globally. I participated in that, and we were successful, and so we were able to go over to their Canadian head offices in Montreal, and I got the chance to check out the company and even interview if I had so wanted to for a role at L'Oreal in that capacity. So it's a great opportunity if you put in the time and the effort and you're successful in the case competition or simulation to get exposure. Attend as many industry conferences and try to get to a bunch of these events where you can really build your network of individuals who are professionals already working in that sphere, as well as finally just media sources. There's great publications like Advertising Age, that's a US one. There's a lot of local marketing publications that you can read. Make sure that you understand what is going on in the industry and what the trends are so that you are able to speak eloquently about them whenever you find yourself in that situation, whether it's an interview or a networking event. So the next topic is just a quick discussion on what are firms looking for. Well, in general, in consumer packaged goods, I'd say there's three overarching topics that describe what firms are looking for, and it continues on from what I mentioned earlier on during the webcast. There's first and foremost running a business. Running a business comes down to being responsible for profit and loss, getting involved in things like forecasting and demand planning to make sure that you've got product on shelves and that you aren't going to be stocking out. It is doing things like looking at the margins of your business and looking at costs and looking at what is not value added for the consumer. So how can you change your product in ways to make it more profitable? Those are some examples of how you would go about running a business. Building a brand is, again, what a lot of people think of when they think of marketing. It's the consumer marketing part of the role. And this is a lot of the fun stuff. This is the advertising. This is the strategy, thinking about what is your brand going to stand for and what are the reasons that consumers will believe that your brand stands for that benefit. It's developing partnerships with other organizations to get your brand out there. Online marketing, it's in-store marketing. It really spans all the tried traditional consumer-focused communications. And then lastly, leading a team. Consumer packaged goods companies, as I mentioned earlier on, marketing is at the hub of them. And so marketing really leads the team and runs the organization. So as a marketer, you are expected to be able to help drive the work and drive the priorities of other functions that are there to support the project that you deem to be a priority for your brand or for your business. And so leadership is critical because other functions will look to marketing to drive that strategy and to drive that direction. So as I break some of the skills down and you think about these key buckets in terms of what brand management and what marketing is all about that firms are looking for, skills that you want to start to show are things like innovation and creativity, problem solving and analytics, building things from scratch. This is another great way to talk about innovation. What have you done that can help set yourself apart where you've created something that wasn't there before? Consumer and marketing savvy. Consumer marketing is obviously experience in kind of what I talked about when I was speaking to building a brand. But marketing savvy is this somebody where you see the passion in them? You see that they are reading publications. They know what's going on with the company that they are interested in. They know what's going on in the industry in general in terms of trends. Project management, that is very important. And while it might not always be the sexier side of marketing, it's very much an important part of what we do because everything is a project and it's got timelines and it's got budgets and it's got deliverables. And as the leader of the team, you're responsible for delivering against a lot of those milestones and pushing the project forward. So strong attention to detail, organizational skills are critical parts of project management. And then finally, initiative and passion, which again tie back to leadership. People want to see leaders that take charge, that go that take the team and the business to places where it hasn't been before, and that are passionate about it because they can rally the team and get everybody excited against a common goal. So what to expect in the recruiting process. So this will really vary by campus. I'll give you that as a bit of a caveat. Some campuses have large career services departments where they've got great relationships and set recruiting processes. Others don't have that. There's pluses and minuses to both, but regardless, it's up to you to empower yourself to be successful in either environment. Some of the things that you can look out for are information sessions. This is pretty much one of the most common types of things you'll expect from a lot of organizations. And here, it's all about differentiation is key. How will you stand out and be remembered? I can't tell you how many information sessions I've been to where the company the students love to ask me questions about, what do you like best about General Mills, or what do you like best about marketing and packaged goods? What is the company like? What's the culture like? I'm happy to answer these types of questions, but what it doesn't do is it does a disservice to the student. I can answer their questions and I can help them get more interested in the company, but the real focus for an information session should be on the student trying to showcase their skills, their experience, to get me as the recruiter interested in them. So you always want to think about what is the right balance between sharing information about yourself, selling yourself, and helping yourself stand out and be memorable, while not taking control of the conversation and having a good balance between the interactions with the recruiter and yourself, as well as the recruiter and the other students. Think about what's your 30-second elevator pitch that's going to speak to what your brand is all about and what you stand for. And think about the one or two things across all the experience you might have that are going to help set you apart and make you be memorable. So that if I've spoken to 35 students, I'm going to remember that one student that had that one experience they told me about that was really memorable. Another area of the recruiting process is on-campus workshops. A lot of the recruiters that have great relationships with the school that go there to recruit every year, they want to have multiple opportunities to get to know the students. So they will go out and run workshops, whether it's topics like resume writing, interview prep, or facilitating mock interviews. These are all great opportunities for you to go ahead and just get more interaction with the company, get better perspective on how they operate and what they're looking for. And so if you have the chance to attend these events, I highly encourage you to do so, and to make sure you can try to get one-on-one contact or you ask good questions to help yourself be remembered. Finally, part of this entire process is networking. There's a lot of things that people think are fairly standard things that are important to remember but are not always done. Things like make sure that you've got a business card on hand so that you can give a card to a recruiter and they can remember you. Often recruiters will be expecting those cards, and for the students that they like, they remember, they want to keep those cards handy in their pocket so that they can talk about the students with other recruiters that were at the event as well. Thank you notes are important. It's a great way after an interview or after an informational session to remind the recruiter of the interaction that you had to reinforce your interest and to just keep your name top of mind. Finally, things like coffee chats are great opportunities for you to get to know the recruiter and the company on a one-on-one basis. You obviously want to do this where you have the opportunity or where the recruiter has offered to have that time available. But this is a great way if you are at a school or there's a company where they're not coming to your school, where you want to go ahead, you want to start to know more about a company and what it might be like, so you set up an informational interview. Well, a coffee chat is a great way to go about that process. Some of the etiquette things that you want to remember in these types of situations are the recruiter is giving you some of their time, so you want to do things like offer to meet at a location that's close to them or convenient to them at a time that might be convenient to them. And always think to offer to pay. Small things like that will leave a great impression on yourself. And then lastly, one of the topics I'm going to talk to are what to expect in the interview itself. So in terms of the interview, there's really two types of questions that you should expect. There's behavioral questions, which are the standard, tried and true questions. Tell me about a time when you showed A, B, C skills, or describe a situation when you showed that skill. Things like, what are your top 3 weaknesses or your top 3 strengths? Make sure that you've thought about a lot of these questions and you've actually gone about trying to rehearse what your answers might be. The best way to set yourself up is to feel like you're prepared for those questions so that you can deliver them on spot in a concise manner during the actual interview. Always think about when a question is asked, what is that key skill or competency they are asking about? So when they ask a question, if it sounds like they're asking you about creativity, think, in that log of preparation that you did, what was the 1 or 2 examples from your past experience that you have that will really help showcase creativity? And that's the time when you want to bring out that kind of an example. A great way or structure that you can use to formulate your answers is called the CAR method. CAR is all about context, action, and result. You want to start out and give a little bit of context to the story that you're about to explain from your past background. The one pitfall is a lot of people give a lot of information about the context. Figure out what's the least amount of information that I have to give to provide context so that the interviewer will understand the story and will be able to follow along. A is for action. Action is very important. You want to talk about what was done and what skills were shown. And the other thing that the one pitfall that people often fall into is a lot of examples are team-based projects. So people will say, well, we went ahead and we showed initiative by kicking off this project 3 weeks early. The interviewer is less concerned about we. They want to understand you. What was your specific role? So make sure you differentiate between we and I when you're talking about these examples. Finally, results are critical. This is the one area where I think most students tend to fall down, where they don't address results at all, or they don't do it in an adequate way. Always think about what examples can I use to reinforce results. Whenever you can bring in numbers, that's better. This project that I did delivered $120,000 of cost savings, or generated another $1 billion of sales, or we grew our business by 10%. Quantifiable results always are great because it provides a sense of the magnitude of the impact that you had. Now, you can't always have examples where you're going to have quantifiable results, or at least quantitative results. So it's good to think about, well, what are other examples of ways I can reinforce the results? You can talk about things like, what was the impact that your experience had on the team? What was the feedback that you received? You could talk about information that might have been given to you in your performance appraisal, or a rating that you received. Think about the different ways where you can showcase the outcome of the work you did and why it was successful, and reinforce that. The other thing to think about that will really help take your answers to the next level is adding L to this framework. So you go from CAR to CARL, and the L stands for learning. If you have been pretty concise with your answer, it's a great way to end by reinforcing what you learned from that experience and how you're going to apply it in the future. The second idea is case-based questions. Case-based is something you often hear in consulting, but case-based questions in marketing are often very different. You're less likely to get a question like, how many golf balls could there be in the country? Um, that's often a common question you'll get in consulting. What you're more likely to get are questions that are related to marketing. So topics that will commonly be covered are brand positioning, market entry, line extensions, pricing, packaging. Think about examples where you might be shown a magazine print ad, and you're going to need to analyze it. Or what are the key things that you want to analyze, and develop a framework in terms of how you go about answering that, so that if you're given that situation during the interview, you are ready. Think about things like, what are your favorite ads? Why are they your favorite ads? Why do you think they were successful? Maybe do some research on the performance of those ads and whether or not they were successful. Often companies will bring in packaging and will ask you to evaluate what the packaging was like. Think it's good? Who do you think they're going after? Other types of questions, they might be more theoretical. You're the brand manager for Nike. Nike sales have been declining year after year. What do you do to go about dissecting the problem and solving it? Something very general like that, but what their recruiter is looking for is to understand what is the logic and what is the thought process this person uses to go about solving this problem, because at the end of the day, the problem I just described is something that almost every one of you will go through at some point if you decide to join an industry like CPG. So in terms of the actual details around the interview, a lot of companies will generally do a first round interview on campus. They're usually behavioral focused. You might have a couple case-based questions. It'll be about 30 to 45 minutes. Then second rounds are usually at the firm. You'll find yourself having multiple interviews, often with multiple individuals, potentially HR, as well as people working in the actual marketing function or department. Interviews are usually going to be focused on specific skills that they are looking to tease out. So a lot of the questions may be around the same topic, and you will expect a mix of behavioral and case-based questions. The other thing, excuse me, the other thing to think about is some companies may have additional rounds of screening. So you might be expecting to have aptitude style tests, or there might be logic puzzles, different things. It really depends on the company. The important thing to just get a sense of is, what are they looking at and how are they using that information? What I found is that in marketing, it's less about getting a certain score on a test. But what it's more about is developing as many different data points about you to help assess whether or not you would be a fit for that company. So the company will look at your performance in the interview. They'll look at your experience. They'll look at the test that you might have completed, and they may look at your grades. And they'll use all that information as different inputs to help with the assessment, the discussion as to whether or not you'd be a fit for that company. So that concludes most of the topics that I was looking to speak to today, but I'm happy to take any questions that you may have at this time, and I'm also happy to take questions after the fact as well.
Great. Hey, thanks a lot, Aaron. This is super helpful. This is Dan from Evisors chiming back in again. We've been collecting a couple of questions over the course of the last half an hour that I was hoping to walk us through. But again, for those of you who have joined, I encourage you to submit even more via the Q&A posting on the right-hand side of WebEx. So to kick off the questions, Aaron, the first question that came in was kind of around international experience. The specific question is, how do you translate international experience with an emerging market context to a developed market such as North America? Or any kind of thoughts between international brand management and US-based brand management type careers?
So that's a great question, and it's a question that comes up often. I think it's important to understand that it's less about the actual company that you might have worked for or the role that you might have had. What it's about is showcasing that you have the skills and the experiences that the company is looking for. So at the end of the day, one of the first things you want to do when you were looking at a job application is take a look at the profile that they put together and list out what are the 5 to 7 big skills that it seems like they are probing for. These are often the skills that will be reinforced at the information session. Then think about your experience, whether it's international experience or whether it is experience that's more local, or even if it's experience that might be from a totally different industry. What are examples of experiences from your past where you've showcased those 5 to 7 skills that you identified, and what are the best examples that you might have? Also think broadly. If you have international experience that you might feel like isn't as relevant, well, think about while I'm in school, I've joined a few clubs, or I might have joined a few organizations or done things like pro bono consulting. What are other parts of your resume or your profile of experience that you could draw upon that will showcase you have those skills? I think the other thing that often helps is with an international background, sometimes some of the experiences or the companies might not be as relatable or as well known to somebody working in a developed market. So that's where getting face-to-face and direct interaction is even more important. If you can develop a one-on-one relationship with human resources or with some of the recruiters, you start to describe much better in person what your experience is like and demonstrate that you actually had a lot of relevant skills and comparable skills that the company is looking for. And often it's that direct interpersonal experience that will really help them understand that yes, you are a candidate that could be right for us, versus just looking at your resume on paper and feeling like the recruiter might not be sure if you're a fit or not.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. The next question, I guess given your background at General Mills and Indigo Books and RIM, some kind of large companies, I'm not sure if you have a perspective on, but the question was, how does a brand manager role differ from kind of a large CPG company versus a startup company?
It's a great question. I think what you'll find in a lot of startup companies or smaller companies is while they may seem like they're very different, they actually can often be very similar. In a lot of startup companies, when you work in marketing, while marketing might be your title, you will often find yourself doing a lot of work that is outside the scope of what your traditional role definition might be. And it's the simple nature of when you're a startup, there's fewer people to do the same type of work, and so you've got to get everybody together, chipping in to put in more effort to get things done. And so often you'll find your work goes outside the scope of what you might do on an everyday basis. However, when you're working at a big organization, you've got a lot more roles and you have a lot more resources, so you have people out there to help you. The interesting link as to why I think brand management often is actually quite similar to a lot of these smaller organizations is that by working in a CPG environment, you really are the true owner of your business. And so we often call ourselves CEOs of our own brand. If our brand was the company, as the brand manager, you would be the CEO of that company. And so you need to be very well versed in every aspect of your business. And it's very similar to a small business because you're almost running it like it's a small business. And so they're actually quite comparable in a lot of ways. I think the big difference obviously comes in terms of the scope. The magnitude of what you're doing is usually different because of the size of a CPG versus the size of what a smaller organization might do.
Great. And, a follow-up question that we also received, very similar. Do you think the same thing applies to luxury brands, or is that a different beast?
I would say in terms of luxury brands, I think each industry or each segment within the industry definitely does vary, but a lot of the skills at the end of the day are quite transferable. Where I think a luxury brand does differ is the levers that you're pulling. So when you are a premium brand or you're a luxury brand, you often have a bit of a different focus than another brand that might not be as luxury or might be more of a commodity. When you're working in a commodity business, it's hard to find a point of differentiation. So the focus of what you're doing is going to be more around rounding out the bottom line. When you're a luxury brand, it's more about how are you getting more people to be aware of your product and wanting to try it. And so the challenges you have are different. But what I will say is that when you work in a CPG environment, what you'll often find is that the company will move you and rotate you around different brands. And so you'll have the opportunity to work in a variety of different categories with different targets. And so you'll be able to develop exposure and experiences to those different targets. And while the differences will obviously probably not be as different as a commodity brand and a luxury brand, all housed within one organization, you will have the opportunity for different experiences and different targets.
Great. I've got two more questions for you, Aaron.
Sure.
In one of your earlier slides, you've kind of covered which companies in Canada and the U.S. are hiring brand managers in the area of consumer goods. Yeah, I saw a list a minute ago, but can you also provide any insight that you may have on kind of what the outlook is for 2012 recruiting?
So it's a great question. What I would say is that obviously there's a lot of challenges that are going on in terms of the economic environment. As it relates to CPG, what you'll often find is that a lot of consumer packaged goods companies can thrive. They can often thrive in terms of economic crisis because they might be delivering staples that the consumers are looking for. So it really varies on the individual organization. I can give you the example of a lot of food companies. When there's an economic crisis, people eat out less often, they eat at home more often, which obviously helps food companies. If you're a company that's selling, products or products like personal care products, where you're providing an experience that can be given in-house versus somebody going out to get something done, like, for example, hair coloring, doing it at home versus getting it done at a salon. Again, when it comes down to an economic crisis, people are more likely to do those things at home. So the nice thing with a lot of CPGs is that they realize that the importance of brands are present, especially during an economic crisis. And so the outlook for recruiting is usually pretty good because they're still looking to hire. They're still looking to recruit other individuals because their businesses are continuing to grow. The other thing that you'll often see in times like we're faced right now is the growing importance of control label or private label. And so what a lot of marketers will do is, the obvious thing to do is to cut your budget and to spend less, or which also means to recruit less individuals. But a lot of CPGs actually take a very different approach because they realize that if you're going up against private label, where you're going to be competing on price, the best way to do that is to differentiate yourself by reinforcing the value and the importance of your brand. And so those companies will actually spend more money on advertising during those times, and they will look for the best talent possible to help them come up with new innovative ideas to differentiate themselves and to grow faster than their categories or the market might be growing. So from what I can see is, companies like General Mills are continuing to recruit and continuing to go out and look for great candidates, and it really comes down to the best candidates that we can find or the candidates that we're looking to hire. It's less about what is going on in the external environment.
Great. And then this last question is a bit of a kind of more high-level type question. But what types of people are happy versus unhappy with careers in kind of this space, based on your experience?
That's a great question. I think the people that are happy in a CPG type environment are those that have varied interests. The way I would speak about this is, CPG is a blend of being a business manager and being a consumer marketer. You can also use the analogy of someone who likes to do both quantitative work and work with numbers while also doing qualitative work or being creative. So someone that finds that they're passionate about both sides of the business, about having control of a brand and managing that business on a day-to-day basis as if they were an entrepreneur, but then also has the ability to develop great communication and compelling messages that people like. It's that blend of liking both types of work that I think result in people being happy here. If you're somebody that doesn't really like, the day-to-day management of a business or working with numbers, then you probably want to be, but you really like, coming up with compelling messages and creative and advertising, then working in an environment like an advertising agency might be a better environment for somebody like that. If it's someone who isn't as creative or doesn't enjoy that about their job as much, but is much more analytical, then you might want to think about working in maybe a category management or a buying environment where it's more about managing numbers and the costs and the profits. Supply chain is another great example there. But if you find yourself as somebody that kind of enjoys both, then CPG is great because it gives you the ability to get exposure to both parts of your brain, if you will, left and right brain.
Fantastic. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time that we have today. But again, to get further insights from Aaron, specifically tailored to your situation and your interests, we encourage you guys to book a session with him through Evisors. And you can see here on screen how to actually find him and what his profile looks like. And I would just like to thank you guys all for your time for dialing in today, and especially thank you to Aaron for the very informative session.
Thanks for having me, and I hope to speak with you soon.